They ordered me to grab my 8-year-old and get out, right in the middle of Christmas dinner. I did not scream or cry. I simply placed my phone on the table and waited. 5 minutes later, the room shifted. The very people who banished me were suddenly begging me to stay. They were not scared of violence or the police. They were terrified of the single stack of papers I had just laid out before them. My name is Aurora West. If you walked past me in a grocery store in Richmond, Virginia, you would see a woman in her early 30s, likely wearing a beige trench coat to ward off the damp chill of the James River. Holding the hand of an 8-year-old girl named Mia, you would see a mother scanning the nutrition labels on cereal boxes. You might see a widow trying to navigate a world that feels a size too big since her husband vanished from it. You would see a quiet woman, a polite woman. You would certainly not see the woman who was about to dismantle one of the most respected families in the state with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. But that is exactly what I did on Christmas Day. The air inside my grandmother's house was always stagnant, smelling of old cedar, roasting turkey, and unspoken judgments. There were 15 of us gathered around the massive mahogany dining table. It was the kind of table that had survived 3 generations. Much like the secrets of the people sitting around it, the crystal chandelier above us cast a fractured, glittering light over the faces of my relatives. My sister, Vanessa, sat across from me, her posture perfect, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. My mother, Elaine, was at the far end, avoiding my eyes, and my father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, looking at me not as his daughter, but as a liability he was finally ready to liquidate. The conversation had started innocently enough. We passed the cranberry sauce, we complimented the stuffing, but beneath the clinking of silverware against fine china, the tension was a physical weight. It pressed against my chest. It made it hard to swallow. For months, they had been tightening the noose, whispering to cousins, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of aunts and uncles, painting a portrait of me as unstable, incompetent, and reckless. They needed the narrative to be perfect before they made their move. And then, right between the main course and dessert, my father cleared his throat. The room went silent. It was a practiced silence, the kind that falls when the patriarch prepares to speak. He did not look at the turkey. He looked directly at me. "Aurora," he said. His voice was steady, the voice of a man who believes his own lies. "We have discussed this as a family. We have tried to help you. We have tried to guide you. But your refusal to cooperate, your erratic behavior, it has left us no choice." I felt Mia's small hand tighten around my fingers under the table. She was only 8. She should have been thinking about the presents waiting under the tree or the pumpkin pie in the kitchen. She should not have been holding her breath, terrified of her own grandfather. I squeezed her hand back, a silent signal. "I am here. You are safe." I did not interrupt him. I let him finish. I wanted every person in that room to hear the words clearly. I wanted them etched into the record of memory. "You are no longer welcome at this table," my father said, his voice rising just enough to carry the weight of a judge passing a sentence. "You are toxic to this family. If you cannot respect our guidance, then you do not belong here. Take your daughter, leave, and never return." The sentence hung in the air. Leave and never return. It was a line straight out of a bad soap opera, but the cruelty behind it was very real. He was kicking his widowed daughter and his granddaughter out into the cold on Christmas Day. Beside me, my aunt gasped softly, but she did not speak up. No one spoke up. They were all complicit in their silence. Vanessa took a sip of her wine, hiding a smirk behind the crystal rim. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over. My father remained standing, waiting for me to cry. He was waiting for me to beg. He expected the Aurora of old, the one who sought approval, the one who apologized for taking up space. He expected me to plead for Mia's sake, to promise I would sign their papers, to hand over the control they so desperately craved just to keep my seat at the table. Instead, I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth. I folded the linen square neatly and placed it beside my plate. Then, I turned to look at Mia, Go to the living room. Honey, I whispered, get your coat. But Mom, she started, her voice trembling. Just for a moment, I said, my voice calm, steady, and devoid of fear. I will be right there. Mia slid off the chair and ran out of the room. The sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway was the only noise in the house. When she was gone, I turned my gaze back to my father. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I looked him in the eye, and then I looked at Vanessa, and finally at my mother. So that is it. I said, that is your final decision. It is, my mother said, her voice icy. She did not look at me. She looked at the centerpiece arrangement of holly and ivy. If you do not trust this family to manage your affairs, you are not part of this family. I nodded slowly. I reached into my purse, which was hanging on the back of my chair. The movement made my brother-in-law flinch, as if he expected me to pull out a weapon. In a way, I pulled out my phone. I placed it face up on the white tablecloth, right next to the silver gravy boat. The screen lit up, bright and jarring in the dim, candlelight ambiance of the room. Very well, I said. If you want me to leave, I will leave. But if I walk out that door right now, the protection I have been holding back walks out with me. So, I assume none of you will mind if I do this. I tapped the screen. I dialed a number I had saved months ago for this exact moment. I pressed the speaker button. The line rang once, twice, then, a voice answered. Professional, sharp, alert. This is Jordan, the voice said. Jordan, I said, leaning slightly toward the phone. It is Aurora. I am at the house. They just gave the order. There was a pause on the other end, a pause that felt heavy with consequence. Copy that. Aurora, Jordan replied. Are you safe? I am, I said, but I'm leaving. Understood. Jordan said. We are executing the protocol. The timeline is live. I will be there in 5 minutes. I hung up. I did not put the phone away. I opened the clock app and set a timer for 5 minutes. I hit start. The numbers began to count down. 4 minutes and 59 seconds. 4 minutes and 58 seconds. I looked up. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. It was subtle at first, a ripple of confusion. My father was still standing, but his chest was no longer puffed out in righteous indignation. His brow was furrowed. Who was that? Vanessa asked, her voice losing its smooth, cultured edge. Who is Jordan? I did not answer. I just watched the numbers count down. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. My mother looked at my father. Richard, she whispered. What is she doing? My father glared at me. Stop this nonsense. Aurora, get out of my house. I am going, I said, remaining seated. In 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Why 5 minutes? My uncle asked from the end of the table. He sounded nervous. Why is someone coming here? Because, I said softly, looking at the candle flame dancing in front of me. You wanted me gone. You wanted to cut me off. You wanted to rewrite the story of who I am and what I'm capable of. You spent 16 months building a lie. It is only fair that I spend 5 minutes bringing the truth. Vanessa let out a scoff. But it sounded brittle. You are bluffing. You do not have anyone. You do not have anything. You are a mess. Aurora. Evan knew it, and we know it. The mention of my husband's name was designed to hurt. It was designed to make me crumble. But Vanessa did not know that grief, when compressed over time, turns into something harder than diamond. It turns into fuel. 3 minutes. My phone buzzed with a notification, then another. Then my father's phone buzzed in his pocket, then Vanessa's. A collective ripple of motion went around the table as people reached for their devices. I watched Vanessa unlock her phone. I watched her eyes widen. I watched the color drain from her face so fast, it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. What is this? She whispered. Her hands started to shake. Aurora, what is this? My father pulled his phone out. He squinted at the screen. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not anger, fear. Stop it, he croaked. His voice was unrecognizable. Aurora, tell them to stop. 2 minutes. I cannot stop it. Dad, I said, you told me to leave. I am just following orders. My mother stood up now, knocking her chair back. It fell with a loud clatter against the hardwood floor. Aurora, please, she said, her voice trembling. We can talk about this. We can sit down. You do not have to do this. It is too late for talk. I said, you had 16 months to talk. You chose to plot instead. 1 minute. The room was in chaos now. My aunt was crying. Vanessa was frantically tapping on her screen, trying to delete things, trying to undo months of digital malice, but she was realizing what I already knew. The internet is written in ink. My father sank back into his chair, looking suddenly very old and very small. The timer on my phone hit 0. An alarm chimed, a cheerful, bright sound that contrasted violently with the devastation in the room. I silenced the alarm. I stood up. I picked up my phone. The doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a firm, decisive summons. They were not terrified of violence. I am a 5'4" woman who has never thrown a punch in her life. They were not scared of the police. The police deal with crimes, and what my family had done was far more insidious than simple crime. It was a moral rot dressed up in legal loopholes. No. The thing that made my sister's hands shake and my father's face turn gray was a simple realization. I had receipts. I had everything. And the person standing at the door was about to bring the one thing they could not bribe, bully, or gaslight their way out of. The objective. Documented truth. But to understand why a stack of papers could bring a dynasty to its knees in 5 minutes, you cannot start at the Christmas dinner. You cannot start with the victory. To understand the revenge, you have to understand the pain. You have to go back. We have to go back 16 months. To a Tuesday afternoon that started like any other and ended with the world collapsing. We have to go back to the day Evan died. I was not a warrior then. I was not a strategist. I was just a wife. I was 32 years old. I worked at a boutique marketing firm called Rivergate Creative Bureau. I made packed lunches. I worried about Mia's math grades. I worried about the leak in the upstairs bathroom. I lived a life of beautiful, mundane worries. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. The sky in Richmond was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I was standing outside Mia's elementary school, waiting for the bell to ring. I was early. I liked being early. It gave me a moment to breathe, to check my emails, to text Evan about dinner. I had just typed the words, tacos or pasta tonight? When my phone rang, it was not Evan. It was a number I did not recognize. Hello? I answered, shielding my eyes from the sun. Is this Aurora West? A male voice asked. Yes, I said. This is Officer Miller with the Virginia State Police. He said, the world did not stop spinning. That is a cliché people use in books. The world did not stop. The birds kept singing. The cars kept driving past the school. The other mothers kept chatting near the gate. The world kept moving, indifferent and cruel. While my personal universe shattered into a million jagged pieces, I need you to listen to me carefully. Mrs. West, the officer said, there has been an accident on I-95. I remember staring at the red brick of the school building. I remember the smell of cut grass. I remember the sound of the school bell ringing. A shrill, piercing shriek that signaled the end of the school day. Evan? I whispered. I am so sorry, the voice said. And just like that, the Aurora who worried about tacos and bathroom leaks ceased to exist. In her place was a woman standing on the edge of an abyss, holding a phone that felt like a block of ice. I did not know it then. Standing there while the children poured out of the school doors, laughing and shouting, but that was the moment the war began. I did not know that my husband's death would not just take him away from me. I did not know it would signal the start of a feeding frenzy. I did not know that the people who would come to hug me at the funeral were already calculating how much I was worth. I stood there, frozen, watching the sea of children, looking for the pink backpack that belonged to Mia. I had to find her. I had to be a mother. I had to tell my 8-year-old daughter that her father was never coming home. That was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. But looking back now, After the Christmas dinner, after the lawyers, after the lies and the vindication, I realized something. The family thought I was weak because I cried that day. They thought I was broken because I fell to my knees in the grass. They were wrong. I did not break. I was being forged. They just did not see the fire yet. The days following the phone call outside Mia's school did not pass in a linear fashion. They did not tick by on a clock. Instead, they washed over me like a slow, suffocating tide. I moved through the logistics of death with a terrifying efficiency that I did not know I possessed. I identified the body. I signed the coroner's paperwork. I chose the casket. I did all of these things while a part of me remained standing outside that elementary school gate, waiting for a husband who was never going to arrive. The funeral took place on a Thursday. It was a humid, overcast day in Richmond, the kind where the air feels heavy enough to wear. We buried Evan in a plot not far from where we had our first picnic. The cemetery was green and manicured, a cruel contrast to the jagged ruin of my internal world. My family was there. Of course, they arrived in a fleet of polished black cars, looking impeccable. My mother, Elaine, wore a black dress that cost more than my first car. My sister, Vanessa, looked like she had stepped out of a magazine spread on grief. Her sunglasses perfectly oversized, her posture rigid and elegant. My father, Richard, shook hands with the attendees with the solemn gravity of a senator on the campaign trail. But there was no warmth. I remember standing by the open grave, holding Mia's hand so tightly I was afraid I might hurt her. I was trembling. It was a physical reaction to the shock, a shivering that started in my bones and would not stop. I needed someone to put an arm around me. I needed someone to hold me up. My mother approached me after the service. She did not hug me. She did not pull me into her chest and let me weep. Instead, she reached out and straightened the collar of my dress. Her fingers were cool and dry. "Pull yourself together." "Aurora," she said. Her voice was low, meant only for me. "People are watching. You need to be strong for the child. Be strong. It is the command people give you when they do not want to deal with the messiness of your pain. It is a way of telling you to be quiet." I nodded, because that is what I had been trained to do my entire life. I swallowed the scream that was clawing its way up my throat and nodded. Later, at the reception we held at my house, the house Evan and I had bought 3 years prior, the dynamic became even clearer. The house was full of people eating small sandwiches and drinking iced tea, murmuring their condolences. I was in the kitchen, refilling a pitcher of water, when I heard voices coming from the pantry. The door was slightly ajar. I recognized the sharp, clipped tones of my sister and the weary sigh of my mother. "She looks terrible," Vanessa said. "She is completely checking out. She is in shock." "Nessie," my mother replied. Though her tone lacked empathy, "It is not just shock," Vanessa insisted. "Look at her. Evan did everything for them. He paid the bills. He handled the maintenance. Aurora does not even know how to mow the lawn. How is she going to manage this place? How is she going to raise Mia alone? She is going to drown." "Mom!" I stood frozen, the water pitcher heavy in my hand. My husband had been in the ground for less than 3 hours. And they were already discussing my incompetence. "We will have to keep an eye on things," my mother said. "If she cannot handle it, we will step in. We have to think about the family reputation. We cannot have her falling apart and losing the house." I backed away silently. I walked back out into the living room and forced a smile onto my face. I told myself I was misinterpreting them. I told myself that grief makes you paranoid. They were my family. They were worried about me. They were scared for me. Their words were harsh. Yes, but surely they came from a place of love. That was the lie I used to survive the first month, after the funeral. The silence set in. The casseroles stopped coming. The flowers wilted and were thrown away. The world expected me to move on. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went back to work. I returned to Rivergate Creative Bureau 2 weeks after the accident. My boss was kind, offering me a lighter workload. But I refused. I needed the work. I needed the routine. I needed to focus on font choices and color palettes, because if I stopped focusing on them, I would have to focus on the empty side of the bed. I built a fortress of routine around Mia. We became soldiers of the schedule. Wake up at 7 in the morning, breakfast at 7:30, school drop-off at 8, work, pick up at 3, homework, dinner at 6, bath, bed. Mia missed him in waves. Some days she was fine, playing with her dolls or drawing in her sketchbook. Other days, she would crumble over something small, like dropping a spoon or not being able to find a specific pair of socks. One Tuesday night, I found her sitting in the hallway in the dark, clutching one of Evan's old flannel shirts. I forgot his voice. "Mommy." She sobbed into my shoulder when I picked her up. I am trying to remember how he said my name, but I can't hear it. We sat on the floor for an hour while I played old videos on my phone, letting her hear him laugh, letting her hear him say Mia Bear over and over again until she fell asleep. I carried her to bed, tucked her in, and then went into the bathroom and cried into a towel so I would not wake her. I was holding it together. I was paying the bills. I was making sure Mia brushed her teeth. I was surviving, but to my family, survival looked like failure. They started visiting more often. Before Evan died, I would see my parents maybe once a month, and Vanessa even less. Now, suddenly, they were omnipresent, but they did not come to help. They did not come to mow the lawn that Vanessa was so worried about, or to babysit so I could have an hour to myself. They came to inspect. It started subtly. My mother would come over for tea on a Sunday afternoon. She would walk through the house, running a finger along the mantel to check for dust. She would open the refrigerator and stare at the contents. Her lips pursed. "You are buying the prepackaged lunches for Mia?" she asked one afternoon, holding up a box of crackers and cheese. "It saves time." "Mom," I said, folding laundry on the sofa. "It is full of sodium," she said, placing it back on the shelf with a clatter. Evan always made her lunch from scratch. I felt the sting of the comparison, but I bit my tongue. Evan did make the lunches. Evan was the cook. I was doing my best to fill his shoes. But my feet were smaller, and I was exhausted. Vanessa was worse. She would stop by unannounced, claiming she was in the neighborhood, though she lived 30 minutes away in a gated community that she rarely left. She would ask questions that felt casual but landed like interrogations. "Have you thought about what you are doing with the second car?" she asked one evening, eyeing Evan's sedan in the driveway. "It is just sitting there depreciating. You really should sell it before it loses more value." "I am not ready to sell it." I said, "It still smells like him. You are being sentimental." "Aurora," she said, shaking her head as if I were a child refusing to eat vegetables. "Sentimentality is expensive. You need to be practical. Have you looked at your insurance rates?" "I have it handled." "Nessie," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "Do you?" she asked, locking eyes with me. "Do you really? Because looking around, it seems like you are barely keeping your head above water." I looked around my living room. There were a few toys on the floor. There was a stack of mail on the counter. It looked like a home where people lived. It did not look like a disaster. But under Vanessa's gaze, I felt messy. I felt chaotic. The judgment began to take root in my mind. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was not capable. Maybe I was just pretending to be an adult. And eventually, the facade would crack. They planted that doubt with the precision of gardeners planting poison ivy. They watered it with passive-aggressive comments and fed it with feigned concern. I did not see the pattern then. I did not see that they were building a case. I thought they were just being their usual critical selves. I did not realize they were gathering ammunition. It was during one of these visits, while my father was lecturing me about the necessity of cleaning the gutters, that a memory of Evan surfaced. It hit me so hard, I almost dropped the mug of coffee I was holding. It was a memory from 3 years ago. We were sitting on the back porch, watching a storm roll in. Evan had just finished reading an article about a family in Ohio who had torn each other apart over a grandfather's inheritance. He had taken a sip of his beer, looked at me, and said something that seemed strange at the time. "Aurora, promise me something," he had said. "What?" I had asked. laughing at his serious tone. "If anything ever happens to me," he said, looking me dead in the eye, "watch the money, and watch the people who say they love you." I had laughed it off. "Evan, you are healthy as a horse, and my family is annoying, but they are not villains." He had not laughed. He had leaned forward, his face intense. "Money changes the temperature of blood. Aurora. It turns people into things you do not recognize. If there is ever a pile of cash on the table, do not trust anyone who reaches for it, not even family, especially not family." I had dismissed it as Evan being cynical. He was a lawyer. After all, he saw the worst in people for a living. I told him he was being dramatic, and we had gone inside to make dinner, standing there in my kitchen, 16 months after his death. Listening to my father criticize the state of my gutters, Evan's voice echoed in my head. Money changes the temperature of blood. I looked at my father. I looked at the way his eyes scanned the room, not looking at his grieving daughter, but looking at the assets. I looked at the way he seemed to be calculating the value of the granite countertops. A cold chill went down my spine. It was colder than the grief. It was the chill of instinct. I did not know it yet, but the mechanism Evan had warned me about was already turning. The gears were grinding. My family smelled blood in the water, and they were just waiting for me to bleed enough to justify the kill. I finished my coffee. I nodded at my father's lecture. "I will take care of the gutters." "Dad," I said. "Good," he said, buttoning his jacket. "We just want to make sure you are protecting the investment." The investment, not the home, not the sanctuary where his granddaughter slept. The investment. He left, and I locked the door behind him. I slid the deadbolt into place with a click that sounded loud in the empty house. I went to the window and watched his car drive away, for the first time since the funeral. I did not feel sad. I felt alert. I went to the drawer where I kept the important papers. I pulled out the file marked a life insurance. I had not looked at it closely yet. I had been too afraid to face the finality of it. But now, with Evan's warning ringing in my ears, I opened the folder. I did not know what was coming. I did not know about the smear campaign, the group chats, or the Christmas ultimatum, but as I stood there in the dim light of the kitchen, looking at the paperwork that represented the sum total of my husband's life, I realized one thing. I was alone, and being alone meant I had to stop being the Aurora they expected. I had to stop being the soft, pliable daughter. I had to become something else. I just didn't know if I could do it in time. The notification came on a Thursday morning. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a bowl of oatmeal that had gone cold, when my phone vibrated against the wood. It was an automated alert from my bank app. I swiped the screen to unlock it, expecting to see a deduction for the electric bill or perhaps the mortgage payment clearing. Instead, I saw a deposit. It was a number so large it looked abstract, like a serial number or a phone number that had lost its formatting. It was $2,350,000. I stared at the screen. I did not blink. I did not breathe. The life insurance policy Evan had taken out 5 years ago, the one he had insisted on upgrading when I became pregnant with Mia, had finally paid out. It was a staggering amount of money. It was enough to pay off the mortgage on the house 3 times over. It was enough to send Mia to any college she wanted. It was enough to ensure that I never had to work another day in my life if I lived modestly. But as I looked at that string of zeros, I did not feel rich. I felt sick. The money sat there in the digital ledger, clean and cold. It was a transaction, a trade. The universe had taken my husband, the father of my child, the only man who had ever truly understood me, and in exchange, it had wired me $2.3 million. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to call the bank and tell them to send it back, to reverse the wire, to give me back the warm body that used to sleep next to me and keep the money. But I could not do that. I was a mother. I had a daughter who needed braces in a few years, who needed clothes, who needed safety. Evan had left this for us because he knew he could not be there to provide it himself. It was his final act of love, translated into the language of finance. I closed the app. I put the phone down. I put my face in my hands and wept until my chest ached. Then, I wiped my face, washed the oatmeal bowl, and made a promise to the empty kitchen. I would not waste a cent of it. I would protect it. It was not lottery winnings. It was Evan's life. I did not tell anyone about the deposit. I did not post about it. I did not mention it to my friends. But somehow, in the way that blood scents the water for sharks, my family knew. Maybe they knew the timeline of insurance payouts. Maybe Vanessa had connections at the agency, or maybe they just sensed a shift in the atmosphere. 2 days later, my mother called. "Aurora," she said, her voice bright and chirpy, a stark contrast to the somber tones she had used at the funeral. "Your father and I were thinking, we have not seen enough of you and Mia lately. We want to start a tradition. Sunday dinners, every week, just the family." I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to spend my Sundays under their microscope, but the guilt was a reflex I had not yet unlearned. "That sounds nice?" "Mom," I said. "Wonderful," she said. "Be here at 6. Do not be late." It was not an invitation. It was a summons. That first Sunday. The atmosphere was suffocating. My parents' house in the affluent West End of Richmond was a museum of mahogany and old money aesthetics. The air always smelled of lemon polish and potpourri. Vanessa was already there when I arrived with Mia. She was pouring wine, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "You look tired, Aurora," Vanessa said as she handed me a glass of Chardonnay. "Are you sleeping?" "I am managing," I said, taking the glass but not drinking. Mia ran off to play in the den, leaving me alone with the tribunal. We sat in the living room, the three of them arranging themselves in a semicircle around me. My father sat in his leather armchair, swirling his scotch. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa. Vanessa sat on the ottoman, leaning forward, her eyes scanning my face. "So," my father began, skipping the small talk, "has the insurance come through yet?" The directness of the question took me off guard. There was no segue, no asking how Mia was doing in school, just the money. I took a slow breath. "Yes," I said. "It cleared this week." Richard nodded, a satisfied look on his face. "Good, good. That is a relief. It is a substantial amount, I assume?" "Evan was always responsible with coverage. It is enough to keep us safe," I said vaguely. My mother leaned in. "Aurora, honey, we are just worried. $2 million is a lot of money for a young woman to handle alone, especially one who is grieving." She let the word grieving hang in the air, but it sounded like she meant incapable. "It is," I agreed, "but I'm not doing anything with it right now. It is just sitting in the savings account. And that is exactly the problem," Vanessa interrupted, her voice smooth like syrup. "Inflation is eating that money every day. It sits in a low-interest account. You need a strategy. Aurora, you need to diversify. You need aggressive growth to offset the lack of Evan's income." I looked at my sister. Since when was she an expert on finance? Vanessa worked in public relations. Her expertise was spin, not stocks. "I am not looking for aggressive growth, Nessie," I said. "I am looking for stability." "That is why you need help," my father said, setting his glass down with a heavy thud. "Aurora, let's be honest. You have never been the numbers person in this marriage. You are the creative one. You are the heart. Evan was the head. Now that he is gone, you are vulnerable. There are sharks out there who will try to take advantage of a widow with a payout." I gripped the stem of my wine glass. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. "I am not an idiot. Dad, no one is saying you are an idiot," my mother soothed. "We are saying you are emotional. You are going through a trauma. You are not in the right headspace to make million-dollar decisions." My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Here is what we think is best. Vanessa has been looking into some wealth management options. She has a head for this sort of thing. We think you should transfer the bulk of the funds into a trust that Vanessa manages for you and Mia. She can handle the investments, the disbursements, the taxes. You won't have to worry about a thing. You can just focus on raising Mia." The room went silent. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. They had shown their hand. It was not even subtle. They wanted the money. They wanted control. If I signed it over to a trust Vanessa managed, I would have to ask my sister for permission to buy groceries. I would have to beg for my own money. I looked at Vanessa. She was smiling, an encouraging, predatory smile. "It makes the most sense." "Aurora," she said, "I can protect you." I thought about Evan's warning, "Watch the people who say they love you." I placed my wineglass on the coaster. I sat up straighter. "No," I said. The smile on Vanessa's face faltered. "What?" I said no. I repeated, my voice steady. "I appreciate the offer, really, but I have already hired a financial advisor. He is a fiduciary. We have a plan in place. The money is staying where it is until we decide on the long-term strategy." My father's face darkened. He did not like being told no. He especially did not like being told no by me. "Who is this advisor?" he demanded. "Is it someone legitimate? Or is it some scam artist you found on the internet?" "He is a professional, Dad," I said, "and he was a friend of Evan's. I trust him." "You trust a stranger over your own sister?" Vanessa asked, her voice rising an octave. "That is insulting." "Aurora, we are trying to help you. We are family. Family does not ask for control of my bank account 3 weeks after my husband dies." I wanted to say, but I didn't. I kept the peace. "I am not transferring the money." "Vanessa, that is final." The rest of the dinner was excruciating. The warmth evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, brittle silence. My mother barely spoke to me. My father ate his roast beef with angry, stabbing motions. Vanessa spent the entire meal texting under the table, her thumbs flying across the screen. When I left that night, there were no hugs. Just a curt nod from my father and a warning from my mother. "You are making a mistake, Aurora. You are going to lose everything." In the weeks that followed, the dynamic shifted from concern to hostility. The Sunday dinners continued, but they became battlegrounds. They would make passive-aggressive comments about the cost of things. "I see you bought Mia new shoes," Vanessa would say, eyeing my daughter's sneakers. "Nike? A bit extravagant, isn't it? You should be saving." "They are shoes." "Vanessa," I would reply, "she grows out of them in 3 months. If I bought generic brands, they criticized me for being cheap. If I bought quality, they criticized me for being wasteful. I could not win. They were trying to wear me down. They were trying to make me doubt my own judgment so much that I would hand over the keys just to make the criticism stop." But I did not break. I kept my meetings with my advisor. I set up the college fund. I paid off the house. I did exactly what a responsible person would do. And that is when they realized that pressure wasn't working. So they switched tactics. If they could not convince me that I was incompetent, they would convince everyone else. It started with a text message. It was a Tuesday evening, about 2 months after the payout. I was helping Mia with her math homework when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin Sarah. Sarah and I were not close, but we were friendly. We exchanged Christmas cards and liked each other's photos on social media. "Hey, Aurora." The text read, "I know it is none of my business, but I just wanted to check in. I heard about the vacation you are planning to Europe. It sounds amazing, but please be careful. I know grief can make us do impulsive things." I stared at the phone. Vacation? I was not planning a vacation. I had barely left Richmond since the funeral. I was saving every penny. I typed back, "What are you talking about?" "Sarah? I am not going to Europe." 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. "Oh," she replied, "that is weird. Vanessa told Aunt June that you were booking a first-class trip to Italy for a month. She said she was worried you were blowing through the insurance money." My stomach dropped. Italy, first class, blowing through the money. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But it was a specific lie. It was designed to paint a picture of a widow who had lost her mind, a woman who was trading her grief for luxury, neglecting her child's future for a Roman holiday. I scrolled through my contacts. I realized with a sinking feeling that if Sarah had heard this, everyone had heard it. My family is large, and gossip travels through the bloodline faster than oxygen. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were shaking. They were not just trying to control me anymore. They were trying to discredit me. They were building a narrative where I was the villain, the reckless, selfish widow squandering the family fortune, and they were the heroes trying to save me from myself. I looked at Mia, who was chewing on the end of her pencil, struggling with a subtraction problem. "Mommy," she said, "what is 6 minus 8? You cannot do that." "Honey," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears, "you cannot take a big number away from a small number. Not yet." But as I looked at her innocent face, I realized that was exactly what my family was trying to do. They were the big number, I was the small one, and they were trying to subtract me from the equation entirely. I picked up my phone again. I did not text Sarah back. I did not call Vanessa. I realized that arguing with the lie would only make me look defensive if I denied it too loudly. I would look like I was covering something up. I needed proof. I needed to be smarter than they were, but I did not know how deep the rot went. I did not know that the text from Sarah was just the first drop of rain in a hurricane that was about to hit me. I did not know that my sister was not just gossiping. She was orchestrating a character assassination that would make me question my own sanity. The text message screen went dark. In the reflection, I saw my own face. I looked tired. I looked pale. But for the first time, I looked angry. They wanted a reckless widow? They wanted a fight? They had no idea what they had just started. The digital breadcrumbs of betrayal are rarely left in plain sight. They are usually hidden in archived folders, deleted threads, or private groups where the invite list is curated with the exclusivity of a country club. I found my evidence on a rainy Wednesday, thanks to the technological incompetence of my Aunt Carol. Carol was my mother's younger sister, a woman who treated Facebook like a diary and had never quite mastered the concept of a private message. She had intended to send a screenshot of a recipe to me. Instead, she sent a screenshot of a conversation from a group chat titled West Family Emergency Support. I was not in the group. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store, rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the metal roof, and zoomed in on the image. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with sorrow, but with the cold, hard thud of adrenaline. The screenshot showed a long message from Vanessa. "I am just so worried about her," Vanessa had written. The timestamp was 2 days ago. "She is spiraling. I went over there yesterday and the house was a mess. There were packages everywhere. I think she is trying to fill the void Evan left with material things. It is classic retail therapy. But at this rate, she is going to burn through the insurance payout in 6 months." Below that, my mother had replied, "I know. It breaks my heart. She is not mentally equipped for this kind of wealth. She has always been easily manipulated. I am terrified some man is going to come along and take advantage of her state." Then, a cousin I had not seen in 5 years chimed in. "Should we intervene? If she is mentally unstable, maybe someone needs to step in legally, for Mia's sake." I lowered the phone. The rain blurred the world outside my windshield into gray streaks, mirroring the murky reality I was suddenly navigating. It was a masterpiece of fiction. The house was not a mess. I had cleaned it top to bottom on Saturday. There were no packages. I had not bought anything other than groceries and school supplies since the funeral. I was not spiraling. I was surviving. But the truth did not matter. The narrative did. Vanessa was not just gossiping. She was building a dossier. She was planting keywords like unstable, manic, and easily manipulated into the family consciousness. If she repeated them often enough, they would become facts. She was creating a reality where I was a danger to my own daughter's future, and she was the benevolent savior waiting in the wings. I drove home in silence, the windshield wipers slicing back and forth like a metronome counting down the time I had left before they made their move. The rumors began to bleed from the digital world into the physical one later that week. I ran into Linda, an old friend of my mother's. In the aisle of the pharmacy, Linda had known me since I was a toddler. She gave me a look that was equal parts pity and morbid curiosity. "Aurora," she said, placing a hand on my arm, "you look, well, I am doing okay." "Linda," I said, reaching for a bottle of children's vitamins, "I was so sorry to hear about your troubles." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Troubles?" I asked, keeping my face neutral. "You know," she said, glancing around as if we were discussing state secrets. "The shopping, the gambling. I know grief does terrible things to us, dear. But just know that we are all praying for you to find your way back to clarity." Gambling. The lie had mutated. It had grown a new head. First, it was a trip to Europe. Then it was designer clothes. Now I was apparently gambling away my husband's legacy. I did not correct her. I knew that denying a rumor only gave it more oxygen. If I got defensive, I would look guilty. If I got angry, I would look unstable. Exactly as Vanessa had predicted. "Thank you for your prayers, Linda," I said. I walked away, my knuckles white as I gripped the shopping basket. They were isolating me. They were ensuring that if I ever tried to tell my side of the story, no one would believe me because I was already the crazy widow in everyone's mind. That Sunday, the family dinner was an exercise in psychological warfare. I brought Mia because I refused to let them think I was hiding her, but I kept her close. The air in my parents' dining room was thick enough to choke on. Every time I took a sip of water, I felt eyes on me, checking for tremors. Every time I laughed at a joke, I felt them analyzing the pitch, looking for signs of hysteria. On the drive home, Mia was quiet in the back seat. She was usually chatty after visiting her grandparents, full of sugar and stories. But tonight, she stared out the window at the passing streetlights. "Mommy?" she asked softly. "Why is Grandma mad at you?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "Grandma is not mad, honey. She is just sad. We are all sad about Daddy." "No," Mia said, shaking her head. "It is different. She looks at you like she looks at the dog when he pees on the rug." The observation was so sharp, so brutally accurate coming from an 8-year-old, that I almost swerved. Children see everything. We think we are protecting them, but they are absorbing the emotional radiation of the room. She is just stressed. "Mia, I lied. It has nothing to do with us." But I knew I could not keep bringing her into that toxic environment. I had to draw a line. I just did not know that the line was about to be drawn for me. The call came 3 days later. On a Wednesday night, it was 9 o'clock. Mia was asleep. I was folding laundry in the living room, listening to the hum of the dryer. When my phone rang, it was my father. This was unusual. Richard West did not make phone calls at night. He was a man of strict routine, and his routine involved watching the news and going to bed. "Hello?" I answered. "Aurora," he said. His voice was ragged. It sounded broken. "Dad? Is everything okay?" "No," he said, and I heard a sob. My father never cried. In 30 years, I had never heard him make a sound like that. "It is all falling apart. Aurora, everything." "What is happening?" I asked, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. "It is the business," he said. "The debts. I tried to shield your mother from it. I tried to handle it. But the creditors, they are calling the house. They are threatening to take the property. We are going to lose the house." "Aurora, the house you grew up in." My mother's voice joined the line from the background, high and hysterical. "We are going to be on the street." Oh God, the humiliation. My stomach twisted. Despite everything, the coldness, the judgment, the rumors, they were still my parents. The idea of them losing their home, the place where I had learned to walk, where I had taken prom photos, triggered a deep, instinctual panic. "How much?" I asked. "How bad is it?" "We need $80,000 just to stop the foreclosure process." My father said, "And another 40 to settle the immediate vendor debts. $120,000. It was a lot of money, but I had it. It was sitting in the account. I can help. I said. The words came out automatically. I did not want them to suffer. I did not want them to be homeless. Oh, thank God. My mother wept. Thank God. We knew you would step up. We knew you would save the family. I can write you a check tomorrow, I said, my mind already working through the logistics. We will treat it as a loan. I will have my lawyer draw up a simple promissory note. No interest. Of course. You can pay me back whenever the business stabilizes. The line went dead silent. The weeping stopped. The ragged breathing stopped. A loan? My father asked. His voice had changed. The broken, desperate man was gone, replaced by something harder. You want your own father to sign a contract? Dad, it is just for records, I explained. It is a large sum. It is standard procedure. I do not take charity, he snapped, and I certainly do not borrow money from my daughter like a common beggar. If you cannot give it freely to save this family, then keep it. I was baffled. They had just told me they were about to be on the street. If I were drowning, I would not care if the life raft came with a contract. It is not charity, I said. It is a loan. It protects both of us. And then, Vanessa's voice cut in. She must have been on the line the whole time, listening in silence. Aurora, don't be difficult, she said. Her tone was brisk, businesslike. Dad is proud. You know that. You cannot emasculate him with paperwork. Then what do you propose? I asked. There is a cleaner way to do this, Vanessa said. We have been talking to the family attorney, since you are overwhelmed with your own transition, and since the family finances are all interconnected now, it makes sense to consolidate management. Consolidate? I asked. Yes, she said. If you sign a general power of attorney granting me limited access to manage the family assets, I can transfer the necessary funds to cover Dad's debts directly. It won't look like a loan. It will look like internal asset restructuring. It saves Dad's dignity, and it takes the burden off your plate. The room seemed to drop in temperature. Power of attorney. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. They did not want the $120,000. That was just the bait. They wanted the key to the vault. A general power of attorney would give Vanessa the legal authority to act on my behalf. She could access my accounts. She could sell property. She could move money. She could drain Evan's life insurance policy dry and call it restructuring. The memory of Evan's voice washed over me, loud and clear. It was from a night when we were signing our own mortgage papers. He had held up a document and tapped it with his pen. Read every line. Aurora. And never, ever sign a power of attorney unless you are in a coma. Giving someone your signature is giving them your life. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. I am not comfortable with that. Vanessa, why not? She demanded. Do you think I am going to steal from you? I am your sister. I did not answer that question. I sidestepped it. I am just not signing any legal documents without my lawyer reviewing them first. I said, and a power of attorney is a massive step. It is not necessary for a simple loan. It is necessary for the family, my mother cried out. Why are you being so selfish? We are talking about our home. If it is about the home, take the check. I said, I will write it to the bank directly. You don't even have to touch the money. No, Vanessa shouted. Her composure cracked. We need the authorization. Aurora, we need to handle this properly, not with piecemeal checks. There was a frantic urgency in her voice that didn't match the situation. If the goal was to pay a debt, my offer was perfect. The only reason to refuse it was if the goal was something else entirely. They were desperate, but not for the house. They were desperate for control. I need to think about it. I said, We don't have time for you to think, Vanessa snapped. The bank is moving on Friday. We need you to come over tomorrow morning and sign. I have the papers ready. Tomorrow? I asked. Yes, tomorrow, she said. 9 o'clock. Don't drag your feet. Aurora, this is an emergency. I looked at the phone. I realized exactly what was happening. They were trying to rush me. They were creating a false crisis, spiking my adrenaline with guilt and fear. hoping I would bypass my logic and sign the paper just to make the screaming stop. "It is the oldest con in the book. I will let you know." I said. "Aurora," my father started, his voice a warning growl. I hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room, my hands trembling. I felt like I had just walked through a minefield. They were not just greedy. They were predatory. They were willing to leverage the threat of their own homelessness to trick me into handing over my autonomy. I looked at the stack of folded towels on the coffee table. Normal life. Just a mom folding towels. But underneath the surface, a war had been declared. I picked up my phone again. I did not call my parents back. I pulled up the contact for the one person Evan had told me to trust. I typed a message to Jordan Hale. "I think they are making their move. They asked for power of attorney." I hit send. Then I went to the front door and checked the locks. I slid the deadbolt home. It was a small gesture, futile against the kind of threat I was facing. But it made me feel slightly better. They wanted me to sign tomorrow. They wanted me to walk into their trap. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was shaking so hard, some of the water spilled onto the counter. I wiped it up. I was not going to sign, but I knew that refusing them tomorrow would not be the end. It would just be the beginning of something much uglier. I had to be ready. The morning after the phone call with my parents and Vanessa, I received a different kind of summons. This one did not come with a threat of foreclosure or a demand for a signature. It came in the form of a handwritten note, delivered to my mailbox in an envelope made of thick, cream-colored paper that smelled faintly of lavender. "Come for tea at 11 o'clock. Come alone. Don't tell your mother." It was signed simply, June. My grandmother, June Carter, was 84 years old. She was the matriarch of the family, but she existed in a separate orbit from the chaos of my parents and sister. She lived in a sprawling Victorian house in the Fan District, a place filled with ticking clocks, velvet armchairs, and a silence that felt observant rather than empty. June had always been kind to me, but she was also terrifyingly sharp. She had eyes that seemed to peel back the layers of politeness to see the ugly truths underneath. I dropped Mia off at school and drove straight to June's house. She was waiting for me in her sunroom. She sat in a high-backed wicker chair, looking like a queen in exile. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her hands, though spotted with age, were steady as she poured tea from a silver pot. "Sit, Aurora," she said. I sat. I took the cup she offered. My hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the previous night's confrontation. "You look like a frightened deer," June said, taking a sip of her tea. "I am tired." "Grandma," I said, "it has been a hard week. It is not just a hard week," she said. She set her cup down. The clink of china against the saucer sounded like a gavel. "I have been watching. I have been listening. Your mother calls me. She complains. She tells me stories about you spending money, about you losing your mind. But I know my daughter, and I know my granddaughter." She leaned forward. Her blue eyes locked onto mine. "There is a predator in this family, Aurora, and you are the prey." I froze. To hear it said out loud, so plainly, was shocking. "They are just worried about money," I said weakly, trying to defend them out of habit. "Dad's business is in trouble." June let out a short, harsh laugh. "Richard's business has been in trouble for a decade. He is a man who thinks he is a king, but manages his coin like a jester. But that is not what this is about. This is about opportunity. They see a wounded animal with a bag of gold, and they are circling. Someone in this house is hunting your money, child, and if you do not stop them, they will pick your bones clean." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a slip of paper. She slid it across the glass table toward me. It was a phone number. No name. Just 10 digits written in her elegant, looping script. "Who is this?" I asked. "A weapon," she said. "When you feel like you are backed into a corner, when you feel like you have no air left in your lungs, you call this number. Do not wait until they break down your door. Call it now." I looked at the number. I looked at her. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "They are your family too." She looked out the window at her garden, where the winter frost was just beginning to melt on the rose bushes. Because I am old. Aurora, I have seen enough greed to know that it is a disease. It eats love. I watched my own husband let money ruin his brother. I will not watch my granddaughter be destroyed by people who should be protecting her. I took the paper. 2 hours later, I was sitting in an office in downtown Richmond. The name on the frosted glass door read, Hale Associates. The man sitting across from me was not what I expected. Jordan Hale was in his late 30s. With messy dark hair and a tie that was slightly loosened, he looked tired, but his eyes were alert. The moment I walked in, he had looked at me with a recognition that startled me. "You are Aurora," he had said. "Evan showed me so many pictures of you." Now, we sat with a heavy wooden desk between us. I had told him everything. I told him about the Sunday dinners. I told him about the rumors of the gambling and the shopping. I told him about the phone call, the demand for the power of attorney, and the threat of my parents' homelessness. Jordan listened without interrupting. He took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he put his pen down and leaned back. "I have been waiting for you to call," he said. "Waiting?" I asked. "Evan and I went to law school together." Jordan said, "We were roommates for 3 years. He was the best man at my wedding. About 6 months before the accident, we went out for drinks. He was worried. Aurora. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I needed to keep an eye on the family, specifically Vanessa and your father." My breath caught in my throat. "Evan knew?" "He suspected." Jordan corrected. "He knew your father made risky investments. He knew Vanessa had a history of, let's call it, creative morality. He made me promise that if he wasn't there to block the door, I would stand in the frame for him." Jordan opened a drawer and pulled out a file. It was thick. "I have not been idle," he said. "Since the obituary was published, I have been running some inquiries, just quietly, just to be safe." He opened the file and turned it around so I could see. The first page was a log of phone calls. "This is a record from the insurance agency that held Evan's policy." Jordan said, "See this date?" I looked. It was dated 4 days after Evan died. "Someone called the claims department pretending to be you." Jordan said, "They asked about the payout timeline. They asked about the procedure for redirecting funds to a third-party trust. They failed the security questions, so the agent flagged it. I felt sick. 4 days. I hadn't even bought a casket yet." "Vanessa?" I whispered. "We traced the number." Jordan said, "It was a burner phone, but the ping came from a cell tower 2 blocks from Vanessa's office." He flipped the page. "And here's the situation with your father's business," he continued. "He told you he needs $120,000 to stop a foreclosure. That is technically true. But it is a lie by omission. The business isn't just in debt. Aurora, it is insolvent. He owes 3 times that amount to private lenders, high-interest lenders." "Loan sharks?" I asked, horrified. "Essentially, yes," Jordan said. "If you give him that money, it won't save the house. It will just pay the interest for a few months. He is sinking, and he is trying to use you as a life preserver, but he is too heavy. If you tie yourself to him, he will pull you and Mia down to the bottom with him." I sat back, feeling the room spin. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. My father was drowning, and Vanessa was trying to steal my boat to save him, even if it meant throwing me overboard. "So what do I do?" I asked. "They are pressuring me to sign the power of attorney tomorrow. If I don't, they will cut me off. They will tell everyone I abandoned them." Jordan smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Let them," he said. "What?" "Let them think they have won," he said. "Or rather, let them think you are confused. Stall. Play the role they have written for you. Be the indecisive, overwhelmed widow. But do not sign that document." He reached into the back of the file and pulled out a document with a blue cover. "Because here's the thing they don't know," Jordan said. Evan was a very smart lawyer. He set up a contingency in his will. It is a clause that is rarely used, but he insisted on it. "We call it a poison pill." He tapped the document. "This is a dormant trust, set up in Mia's name, Currently, it is empty, but the clause states that if you, Aurora West, are ever coerced, threatened, or manipulated into signing over your financial agency to a third party, or if you display signs of compromised judgment due to external pressure, the insurance money automatically bypasses you. I frowned, trying to understand. Bypasses me? It transfers immediately and irrevocably into this trust. Jordan explained, and the trustee of this trust is not you. It is not Vanessa. It is a court-appointed fiduciary, me. I stared at him. So even if I signed the power of attorney, I said slowly, even if I gave them everything they wanted, they would get nothing. Jordan finished. The moment they use that power of attorney to try and move a single cent, the trap snaps shut. The money vanishes from your accounts and locks down in Mia's trust until she is 25 years old. They would be stealing an empty wallet. I felt a sudden, fierce surge of pride for my husband. He had built a fortress around us that I didn't even know existed. But we are not going to use the poison pill just yet, Jordan said, because if we do that, they will just fight you in court for years. We need to stop them permanently. We need to expose them so thoroughly that they never dare to come after you again. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. We are going to build a case. Aurora, you are going to collect evidence. Every text, every voicemail, every email. I need you to document the smear campaign. I need proof that they are conspiring to defraud you. And then, when we have enough, we are going to drop the hammer. When? I asked. Christmas, Jordan said. I looked at him, surprised. Christmas? That is 2 months away. It is the perfect stage, he said. Family gatherings are where the pressure is highest. That is when they will make their final move. That is when they will try to corner you publicly. And that is when we will be ready. I left Jordan's office with a plan. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow. I was an operative. I drove back to Grandma June's house to pick up the car seat I had left there. She was still in the sunroom, reading a book. Did you meet him? She asked. Without looking up, I did. I said, good, she said. She reached into the drawer of the table and pulled out a thick, sealed manila envelope. Then you will need this, she said. What is it? I asked, reaching for it. She placed her hand over mine, stopping me. Do not open it, she commanded. Not yet. This is the final nail in the coffin. If you use it too early, they will find a way to wiggle out of it. You keep this sealed until Christmas dinner. You open it only when the lies are thickest in the air. I looked at the envelope. It was heavy. What is in it, Grandma? The truth, she said. The kind of truth that burns bridges. I took the envelope. I nodded. Thank you. June. She looked at me, and for a moment, her face softened. You remind me of myself, she said. Before I learned to be hard. Now go. You have a role to play. I drove home. The fear that had been gripping my chest for weeks was gone. It was replaced by a cold, quiet determination. I practiced my lines in the rearview mirror. I practiced the look of the overwhelmed, confused widow. I would give them their show. I would let them think they were herding me toward the slaughterhouse. I would let Vanessa gloat. I would let my father lecture. I would let my mother cry her crocodile tears. I would wait for Christmas. And when they finally said the words, leave and never return, I would show them exactly what happens when you corner a woman who has nothing left to lose but the truth. The snow started falling on the 22nd of December. It was a wet, heavy snow that turned to gray slush the moment it hit the pavement, coating Richmond in a layer of grime that perfectly matched the mood inside my house. I was in the kitchen, carefully measuring flour for the sugar cookies Mia and I made every year. It was a tradition Evan had started, and I was defending it with the ferocity of a guard dog. We would make the cookies, we would decorate them, we would play Christmas jazz, we would be normal, even if the world outside our front door was sharpening its knives. The doorbell rang at 2 p.m. I did not have to guess who it was. The timeline Jordan and I had mapped out predicted a direct contact attempt 3 to 4 days before the holiday. Desperation has a predictable rhythm. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. Through the frosted glass panel, I saw the silhouette of my sister. She was pacing, her high-heeled boots clicking impatiently against the concrete of the porch. I opened the door, but I did not step back. I stood squarely in the threshold, my hand gripping the doorknob, effectively blocking the entrance. Vanessa blinked. She was wearing a white cashmere coat that looked pristine against the dirty snow. In her hand, she held a blue legal folder. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked. Her voice was tight. The pleasantries stretched thin over a core of frantic energy. "It is freezing out here." "Aurora, I think it is better if we talk out here," I said. "I am baking with Mia." "I don't want to disturb her," Vanessa scoffed. A sharp puff of air that turned into steam in the cold. "Disturb her? I am her aunt. I am family. Since when do I need an appointment to see my niece? Since you started trying to steal her inheritance." I thought, but I kept my face blank. "What do you want?" "Vanessa?" I asked. She thrust the blue folder toward me. It hit my chest with a soft thud. I caught it reflexively. "I brought the papers," she said. "The power of attorney. Dad is a wreck. Aurora, he cannot sleep. He is terrified the bank is going to lock the doors on the business the day after Christmas. We need this signed, now." I looked down at the folder. I did not open it. I knew exactly what was inside. Pages of dense legal jargon that would strip me of my financial autonomy and hand the keys to my life over to a woman who viewed me as an ATM. "I told you," I said, looking back up at her. "I am not signing anything without a full legal review, and my lawyer is away for the holidays." "That is a lie," Vanessa snapped. She took a step forward, trying to use her physical presence to intimidate me. She was taller than me, always had been, and she knew how to use her height, but she forgot that I had spent the last 2 months carrying the weight of the world. I did not budge. "You are lying, Aurora," she hissed. "You are stalling. And do you know why? Because you are selfish. You think that just because you have this money now, you are suddenly better than us. You think you are smart. I am being cautious." I said, "That is what Evan would have wanted. Don't you dare speak for him." Vanessa cut in. Her eyes narrowed, becoming venomous slits. "You know, we all wondered why he married you. You were so plain, so quiet. He was a star. Aurora, he was going places. And you? You were just the anchor he dragged around. The words were designed to draw blood. They were calculated to pierce the armor of the grieving widow and hit the insecurity that lived deep in my belly. She wanted me to crumble. She wanted me to believe that I was nothing without Evan, and therefore, I was nothing without the family that claimed to represent him. I felt the sting, hot and sharp, but I also felt something else. I felt the cold, hard reassurance of the truth Jordan had shown me. I knew things she didn't know I knew. I knew about the burner phone. I knew about the insolvency. "You were lucky," Vanessa continued, leaning in close. Her perfume was cloying, a heavy floral scent that made me nauseous. "You won the lottery when he picked you, but now he is gone, and without us to guide you, without us to manage you, you are going to ruin everything. You are just a frightened little girl playing house. Sign the papers. Aurora, be a good sister for once in your life." Before I could answer, I heard a sound behind me. "Mommy?" I spun around. Mia was standing in the hallway, holding a wooden spoon covered in cookie dough. She was wearing her oversized t-shirt covered in flour. Her eyes were wide, darting between me and the woman in the white coat who looked like an ice queen. "Why is Aunt Nessie yelling?" Mia asked. The transformation in me was instantaneous. The strategic calm vanished, replaced by a fierce, protective biological imperative. My daughter was not going to hear this. She was not going to see her mother being bullied. She was not going to absorb the poison Vanessa was spitting. I stepped back inside and pulled the door partially shut, shielding Mia from view while keeping my body between them. "It is nothing, baby," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Go back to the kitchen and put the sprinkles on the trees. I will be there in 10 seconds. "But," Mia started. "Go, Mia, now." She hesitated, then turned and ran back toward the kitchen. I waited until I heard the upbeat saxophone of the Christmas jazz playlist before I turned back to Vanessa. My face was no longer blank. "Get off my porch," I said. Vanessa looked stunned. She had never heard that tone from me. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." I said, "You come here, to my home, where my daughter lives, and you insult me? You insult my marriage? You are done." "Vanessa, I am not done," she shouted, her voice rising. "I am trying to save this family. You are trying to save yourself," I shot back. Vanessa glared at me, her chest heaving. She realized that the intimidation tactic had failed. She realized she could not bully me into signing on the doorstep. So, she played her final card. The ultimatum, the trap. "Fine," she said, stepping back off the porch into the snow. "Be that way. But here's the deal. Aurora, if those papers are not signed by Christmas morning, don't bother coming to dinner." I stared at her. "Not come to Christmas?" "You heard me," she said, a cruel smile touching her lips. "If you are not part of the solution, you are not part of the family. Dad agrees. Mom agrees. If you don't bring that signed folder to the table, you are out. No contact, no visits. We will cut you off, and you will be all alone in this big empty house." It was a clumsy trap. She wanted me at that dinner. She needed me at that dinner. If I didn't show up, they couldn't pressure me in front of the relatives. They couldn't use the social weight of the extended family to crush me. By telling me not to come, she was betting on my fear of abandonment. She was betting that I would rush to the dinner, papers in hand, begging to be let back in. I looked at her. I looked at the blue folder in my hand. "I will be there." I said, "Good," she said. "Bring a pen." She turned and walked back to her car, her white coat billowing behind her. I watched her drive away. Then, I looked down at the folder. I walked to the recycling bin at the side of the house and dropped the folder into it. It landed with a satisfying slap against the plastic. I went back inside, locked the door, and washed my hands. Then I went into the kitchen and helped Mia put red sprinkles on a cookie shaped like a star. 3 days passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. I spoke to Jordan every 4 hours. We went over the plan until I could recite it in my sleep. We rehearsed the objections. We rehearsed the reveals. Christmas morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The sun refused to shine. It was fitting. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. It was my father. I put it on speaker so I could continue braiding Mia's hair. "Hello, Dad. Merry Christmas." There was no holiday greeting on the other end. "Are you coming?" he asked. His voice was heavy, authoritative. It was the voice he used when he was talking to underperforming employees. "We are getting ready now," I said. "Do you have the papers?" he asked. I paused. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a dark green dress, high-necked, long-sleeved. It was severe. It was armor. "I am bringing everything that needs to be seen." I said, "Good," he said. "We are going to settle this before we eat. In front of everyone. I want the whole family to see that we are united. I want your Uncle Bob and Aunt Shirley to witness the transfer so there are no questions later." He was confirming the ambush. He wanted witnesses. He wanted to use the shame of a public spectacle to ensure I didn't back out. If I refused to sign in front of Uncle Bob, I would be the difficult daughter creating a scene at Christmas. I would be the villain. "Don't be late, Aurora," he said, "and don't disappoint me." He hung up. I finished braiding Mia's hair and tied it with a red ribbon. "You look beautiful, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "Mommy?" she asked, looking at my reflection. "Are you scared?" I looked at my own eyes in the glass. They looked tired. Yes, but they looked steady. No, I lied. I am not scared. I am just focused. "We are going to Grandma June's house, right?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Is it going to be like last time? With the yelling?" I turned her around so I could look her in the eye. "Listen to me, Mia. When we get there, I am going to take you to the playroom with cousins Sophie and Jack. There is going to be a movie playing. I want you to stay in that room until I come to get you, okay? Even if you hear loud voices. Even if you want a snack. You stay in the playroom. Promise? She asked. Promise, I said. She nodded. She trusted me. And that trust was the fuel that was going to power me through the next 3 hours. I drove to Jordan's office on the way to the dinner. The city was empty. Everyone tucked away in their homes opening presents. Jordan was waiting in the lobby of his building. He was wearing a suit, sharp and dark. He held a black leather briefcase. He handed me a heavy, thick envelope. This is your set, he said. I opened it. Inside were 3 distinct bundles of paper, clipped together with metal binders. Bundle A was the timeline. It was a chronological record of every text, every email, and every call log. It included the screenshot from Aunt Carol. It included the burner phone records. It was the story of the smear campaign told in their own words. Bundle B was the digital authentication certificate. It was a technical document that proved the metadata of the messages was real, that nothing had been altered. It was the shield against their inevitable claim of fake news. And Bundle C. Bundle C was the weapon Grandma June had given me. I had finally opened her envelope the night before, as instructed. Reading it had made my blood run cold. It wasn't just leverage. It was a nuclear option. It was a document that proved my father's insolvency wasn't just bad luck. It was negligence bordering on fraud. And it proved that Vanessa had been siphoning money from the family accounts for years to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford. I looked at Jordan. Are you ready? He asked. I tucked the envelope into my large tote bag. I am ready. Remember the rules, Jordan said, his eyes serious. I nodded. I recited them back to him. Rule 1. No emotion. If I cry, I lose. If I scream, I lose. They want a hysterical woman. I will give them a statue. Rule 2. No defense. I do not defend my spending. I do not defend my parenting. I only present facts. Defense implies guilt. Rule 3. Wait for the trigger. I do not pull the papers until they explicitly demand the signature. I let them dig the hole all the way to the bottom before I kick the ladder away. Perfect, Jordan said. I will be parked down the street. I will be watching the live stream from your phone's audio feed. The moment you give the signal, the 5-minute warning, I will come in. I got back in the car. Mia was singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in the back seat. We drove to the historic district. Grandma June's house rose up like a fortress of brick and ivy. Dusted with snow, the driveway was full of cars, the Mercedes, the BMWs, the symbols of status that my family clung to like life rafts. I parked my modest sedan at the end of the line. I took a deep breath. The air in the car felt thin. This was it. They were inside, waiting for me. They had their script. Vanessa had her insults polished. My father had his speech about duty and family honor prepared. My mother had her tears ready to flow on command. They were expecting a victim. They were expecting a woman broken by grief, softened by guilt, and desperate for approval. They wanted a show. They wanted a public execution of my independence. I reached back and squeezed Mia's hand. Let's go get a cookie, I said. I stepped out of the car. The cold air hit my face, bracing and sharp. I adjusted my tote bag on my shoulder. It was heavy with the weight of the truth. I walked up the path to the front door. I could see the glow of the chandelier through the windows. I could see the shadows of people moving inside. They had no idea what was walking up their driveway. They wanted a scene they would never forget. I was about to give them exactly that. Grandma June's house in the Fan District was an architectural jewel of Richmond history. From the sidewalk, it looked like a Christmas card brought to life. Wreaths made of fresh balsam fir hung in every window, each one tied with a velvet ribbon the color of dried blood. Electric candles flickered in the glass panes, casting a warm, inviting glow against the snow-dusted brick. To a stranger walking by, this house promised warmth, safety, and the kind of unconditional love that holiday movies are built upon. I knew better. I walked up the slate path, holding Mia's hand. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but inside my coat, I was sweating. It was not the sweat of fear. It was the sweat of anticipation. It was the physical reaction of a soldier waiting in the landing craft, listening to the waves hit the metal, waiting for the ramp to drop. I pushed open the heavy oak door. The smell hit me first. It was a dense, suffocating perfume of roasting turkey, sage stuffing, beeswax polish, and expensive cologne. The entryway was crowded with coats. The chatter of 15 people buzzed in the air, a low hum of familiar voices. But the moment I stepped into the light of the foyer, the hum stopped. It did not taper off. It was severed. Heads turned, eyes locked onto me. In that silence, I felt the full weight of the campaign Vanessa had been waging for 2 months. I saw it in the eyes of my Aunt Shirley, who looked at me with a tragic, damp pity, as if I were a terminal patient. I saw it in the eyes of my cousin Mark, who looked at my dress, likely calculating how much of Evan's insurance money I had wasted on it. I saw it in the stiff, averted gaze of my Uncle Bob. They did not see Aurora. They saw the caricature Vanessa had drawn for them, the unstable widow, the spendthrift, the woman who was disrespecting her husband's memory by losing her grip on reality. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was calm. It did not waver. "Merry Christmas." "Aurora," Aunt Shirley said, stepping forward to offer a hug that felt more like a frisking. "We are so glad you made it. We were worried you might not be up for it." "Why wouldn't I be up for it?" I asked, pulling back. "It is Christmas." Shirley exchanged a glance with my mother, who was standing near the staircase. "Well, you know, it has been a hard year. We just want you to be safe." I didn't answer. I knelt down to help Mia with her coat. "Go find Sophie and Jack." I whispered to her, "Remember the plan?" "Playroom." Mia whispered back, "Good girl." I watched her run down the hallway, her black patent leather shoes tapping against the hardwood. I waited until I saw her disappear into the den where the other children were gathered. I saw the teenage cousin who was on babysitting duty close the door. My hostage was safe. Now I could enter the arena. I walked into the dining room. The table was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was set for 16 people, laden with silver candelabras and crystal goblets. The centerpiece was a sprawling arrangement of holly and white roses that blocked the view across the table, creating little islands of isolation. Vanessa was standing at the head of the table, directing traffic like a stage manager. "Aurora," she called out, her voice bright and brittle. "Over here. I saved you a spot." She pointed to a chair right in the center of the long side of the table. It was the most exposed position in the room. Directly across from me sat my father. To my left was Uncle Bob, the family's unofficial judge of character. To my right was my mother. They had boxed me in. I took my seat. I placed my large tote bag on the floor between my feet. I felt the hard edge of the document envelope through the leather. It was a grounding sensation. The family filed in. Chairs scraped against the floor. Napkins were unfurled. Wine was poured. My father did not look at me. He was busy uncorking a bottle of Cabernet, focusing on the task with an intensity that betrayed his nerves. My mother was arranging her silverware, moving her fork a millimeter to the left, then a millimeter to the right. She looked pale. She knew what was coming. She was an accomplice, but she didn't have the stomach for the violence of it. Vanessa, however, was glowing. She sat at the opposite end of the table from Dad, acting as the co-pilot of this disaster. "Shall we say grace?" Dad asked. We bowed our heads. He muttered a prayer about gratitude, family unity, and stewardship. The word stewardship hung in the air a little too long. It was a dog whistle. Dinner began. For the first 30 minutes, it was a masterclass in passive aggression. The conversation flowed around me, but every topic seemed to bend back toward money and responsibility. "The economy is terrible right now," Uncle Bob said. Cutting into his ham, "Interest rates are up. It is a dangerous time to be liquid. You have to be locked down. You have to be conservative." He looked at me as he said it. I took a sip of water. "I agree, Uncle Bob. That is why I am very careful." "Are you?" Vanessa asked from down the table. Her voice was loud enough to cut through the other conversations. "I heard you were looking at a new car." "Aurora," A luxury SUV? The table went quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. I am driving the same sedan I have had for 5 years. Vanessa, I said, you know that. You saw it in the driveway. I am just saying, she said, taking a sip of wine. Perception is reality. You don't want people thinking you are burning through the safety net Evan left. I am not worried about what people think. I said, I am worried about facts. My father cleared his throat loudly. Let's not argue. Not on Christmas. But the seed was planted. The tension ratcheted up a notch. The air in the room grew hotter. The candles seemed to burn brighter. Sucking the oxygen out of the space, I focused on my food. I ate a bite of turkey. It tasted like sawdust. I ate a bite of cranberry sauce. It tasted like metal. I was checking the time on my watch. Jordan was outside. He was monitoring the audio feed from my phone, which was sitting face down on the table, recording everything. We were waiting for the escalation. It came just as the plates were being cleared for dessert. Vanessa stood up. She held a spoon and tapped it against her wine glass. Cling, cling, cling. The room fell silent. This was it. The performance. Everyone. She began. Her voice trembled slightly, a perfect affectation of emotional distress. Before we have pie, I need to say something. This has been a difficult year for all of us. Losing Evan it was a blow that shattered us. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. If I didn't know better, I would have believed her. But the person suffering the most is Aurora. She continued. I sat perfectly still. I did not blink. We have all seen it, Vanessa said, gesturing vaguely to the room. The grief has been overwhelming, and with that grief comes a loss of clarity. We have watched Aurora struggle. We have watched her make decisions that, frankly, scare us. She paused for effect. My mother looked down at her lap. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw set like granite. Evan worked his whole life to provide security for his wife and daughter. Vanessa said, and it is our duty, as his family, to ensure that security doesn't vanish because of a temporary mental lapse. We cannot stand by and watch a fortune be squandered while a child's future is at risk. She reached under the table and pulled out the blue folder, the same one I had thrown in the recycling bin. She must have printed a fresh copy. Aurora, she said, her voice turning soft, pleading. We love you, we love Mia, and because we love you, we are stepping in. We are not asking anymore. We are insisting. She walked around the table. The sound of her heels was the only noise in the room. She stopped behind my chair. She placed the folder on the table in front of me. She placed a heavy, expensive fountain pen on top of it. This is a co-management agreement, she announced to the room. It simply adds Dad and me as signatories on the estate accounts. It requires 2 signatures for any withdrawal over $500. It allows us to stabilize the investments and ensure that the principal remains untouched for Mia. She looked at Uncle Bob. Bob, you agree, don't you? Someone needs to be the adult in the room. Bob nodded gravely. It makes sense. Aurora, it is standard protection. You are a young woman. You don't know this world. Let your father handle it. I looked around the table. They were all nodding. The herd mentality had taken over. To them, this looked reasonable. It looked like love. They saw a competent family trying to save a drowning widow. They didn't see the sharks. They didn't know the business was insolvent. They didn't know Vanessa had been trying to access the accounts since the funeral. My father spoke up then. His voice was the final gavel. Sign it, Aurora, he said. He didn't ask. He ordered, sign it, and we can put all this ugliness behind us. We can be a family again. We can take care of you. I looked at the folder. General Power of Attorney and Asset Management Agreement. The title was bold and black. If you don't sign it, my mother added, her voice shaking, then you are telling us that you don't trust this family. You are telling us that you choose the money over us. And if you make that choice, Vanessa said, leaning down so her face was close to my ear, her whisper loud enough for the table to hear, then you are not welcome here. You can take your daughter and go. We won't watch you destroy yourself. The trap was sprung. The pressure was absolute. The entire room was staring at me, waiting for me to pick up the pen, waiting for the capitulation. They expected me to cry. They expected me to say, "Thank you for saving me." I looked at the pen. I looked at my father. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. They thought I was breaking. They thought I was hesitating out of fear. But I wasn't. I was waiting for the 5-minute mark. I glanced at my watch. I looked up. I pushed the blue folder away from me. Just an inch. No. I said, the word fell into the room like a stone into a still pond. "Excuse me?" Vanessa said, straightening up. I said no. I repeated. My voice was not loud, but it projected to the corners of the room. "I will not sign this. I will not give you control of my husband's legacy. And I will not let you use my daughter as an excuse for your greed." My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "Greed?" he roared. "How dare you? We are trying to save you. You are trying to save yourself." "Dad," I said, "get out," he shouted. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "If you are going to insult us in our own house, then get out, leave, and never return." There it was, the line. My mother looked up, her face twisted. "Go, Aurora. If you cannot help this family, then you are dead to us." Vanessa crossed her arms, a smirk playing on her lips. She thought she had won. She thought I would run out crying, and they could spin the story of how I had a mental breakdown at Christmas. I stood up. I picked up my phone from the table. "Okay," I said. "I will leave." The room exhaled. They thought it was over, but I didn't move toward the door. "But before I go," I said, tapping the screen, "I assume you won't mind if I do this." I hit the call button. I hit speaker. I held the phone up. "Jordan," I said, "I am here." His voice boomed through the silent dining room. "I am activating the protocol," I said. "Bring the package." I looked at Vanessa. Her smirk faltered. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. I looked at my father. He was still standing, his face red with rage, but his eyes were darting around, confused. I looked at my watch. 5 minutes, I said to the room. "What happens in 5 minutes?" Uncle Bob asked, looking uneasy. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all night. The truth arrives. And then I sat back down. "I am not leaving yet." I said, "Not until you see what I brought for dessert." The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, piercing sound. Vanessa jumped. My mother put her hand to her throat. For the first time all night, the gaze of the room shifted away from me and toward the front door. The air of judgment evaporated, replaced by a sudden, electric current of fear. They didn't know what was coming, but the certainty in my voice had terrified them. I folded my hands on the table, right next to the rejected blue folder. "Someone should get that," I said. The silence that followed my refusal was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and pressurized. It felt like the air inside a submarine that had dived too deep. I had said the word no, and it sat in the center of the mahogany table like a grenade with the pin pulled out. My father was the first to move. The vein in his temple, usually invisible, began to throb with a violent intensity. He did not just look angry, he looked betrayed. To a man like Richard West, obedience was the currency of love, and I had just declared myself bankrupt. "You will not sign?" he repeated. His voice was dangerously quiet, a low rumble that vibrated through the silverware. "I will not," I said. I clasped my hands together to stop them from trembling. Not out of fear, but out of the sheer magnitude of the moment. I was finally standing on my own 2 feet, and the ground felt solid. "You ungrateful child," he spat. The quiet was gone. He stood up so abruptly that his chair tipped backward and crashed onto the floor. The sound made Aunt Shirley jump and clutch her pearls. "We take you in. We feed you. We try to protect you from your own incompetence. And this is how you repay us? By spitting in our faces at Christmas dinner?" "It is not an insult, Dad," I said, keeping my voice level. It is a boundary. Boundary? He roared. There are no boundaries in family. There is loyalty. You are letting your selfish pride destroy everything Evan built. You are going to ruin that little girl's life because you are too stubborn to admit you need help. He was winding himself up, his face turning a shade of plum that matched the wine in his glass. I am done asking. Aurora, he said, pointing a shaking finger at my face. I am done coddling you. You pick up that pen and you sign that paper right now. I looked at him. I looked at the pen. I did not move. And if I don't? I asked. Then you are no daughter of mine, he said. The words were not shouted. They were delivered with a cold, final precision. If you do not sign that paper, you get out of this house, you take your daughter, and you leave. And do not think you can come crawling back when the money runs out. If you walk out that door without signing, you leave and never return. The sentence hung there. Leave and never return. It was the nuclear option. He was threatening me with total exile. He was betting that the fear of being an orphan, of losing the only family I had left, would break me. My mother, who had been weeping silently into her napkin, looked up. Her eyes were dry now. Your father is right, she said. Her voice was thin and sharp, like a wire. We cannot watch you destroy yourself. Aurora, if you do not care about this family enough to listen to us, then why are you here? If you are not with us, you are against us. Just go. She did not look at me. She looked past me, at the wall. It was easier to banish a ghost than a daughter. Vanessa saw her opening. She saw that the threats were landing, but she needed to twist the knife one final time to ensure the kill. She leaned forward, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic concern. Aurora, please, she said. Her voice was syrupy, dripping with fake empathy. Don't do this to Mia. Think about her future. Do you really want her to grow up estranged from her grandparents? Do you want her to struggle because her mother was too proud to take advice? Do it for her. That was the mistake. She used my daughter. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. I stood up. I picked up the blue folder. For a second, a flicker of triumph crossed Vanessa's face. She thought I was going to sign. I held the folder up. You want to talk about Mia? I asked. My voice was no longer soft. It was hard. It carried to the back of the room where the cousins were whispering. Let us talk about Mia. I continued. You say you are doing this to protect her inheritance. You say you are doing this because I am irresponsible with money. I looked directly at Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob, I said, did you know that 3 days ago I offered to write my father a check for $120,000? Bob blinked. He looked at my father, then back at me. What? I did. I said, I offered him an interest-free loan to cover the debts he is drowning in. I offered to pay off the creditors who are calling the house. I offered to save this family from foreclosure. My father's face went white. He had not told them about the offer. He had not told them about the debts. She is lying, Vanessa shrieked. She stood up, knocking her wine glass over. Red wine bled across the white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. I am not lying. I said, I have the email draft. I have the checkbook in my bag. I offered to help, but they refused. I turned back to the room, addressing the stunned audience of relatives. Why would a family that is so desperate for money refuse a check for $120,000? I asked. Why would they say no to cash that would save their home? I dropped the blue folder back onto the table. It landed with a heavy slap. Because they do not want a loan. I said, a loan implies that I am an equal. A loan implies that I have power. They do not want help. They want control. They want this signature because it gives them access to everything. Not just $100,000, all of it. $2 million. Liar, my father shouted. He looked like he was about to come across the table. You are twisting everything. I am clarifying everything. I said, you didn't want my money if it came with boundaries. You only wanted it if you could take it. I looked at Vanessa. You say I'm spending recklessly? I asked. You told everyone I was booking trips to Europe. You told cousin Sarah I was gambling. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was my bank statement from the last month. "This is my ledger," I said, holding it up. "The only thing I have bought in the last 30 days is groceries, gas, and a winter coat for Mia." I looked at Aunt Shirley. "Does that look like a woman who is losing her mind?" I asked. "Or does it look like a woman who is being framed?" The room was deadly silent. The air had shifted. The blind faith they had placed in my father and Vanessa was cracking. I could see the doubt creeping into Uncle Bob's eyes. I could see the confusion on Aunt Shirley's face. My grandmother, June, sat at the end of the table. She had not moved. She had not spoken. She was watching me with an intensity that felt like a spotlight. She gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Finish it." I took a deep breath. "You told me to leave," I said to my father. "You told me that if I don't sign, I am not family." I looked around the room. At the people I had known my entire life, the people who had judged me, the people who had believed the worst of me without asking a single question. "Fine," I said. "If that is the condition of being in this family, that I have to be a victim, that I have to be a fool, then I decline the membership." I picked up my purse. "I will leave," I said. "I will take my daughter, and we will walk out that door, and you will never see us again. You will get your wish." My mother made a small, choked sound, but she did not stop me. My father stood panting, his fists clenched on the table. Vanessa looked pale, her eyes darting between me and the relatives, trying to gauge if her narrative was holding up, but, I added. I paused. I let the word hang there. "Before I go," I said, reaching into my pocket, "I have one phone call to make." I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright in the dim room. My father frowned. "Who are you calling?" I did not answer him. I dialed the number. I put it on speaker. I set the phone down on the table. Right in the center of the wine stain, the line rang once. "Jordan Hale." The voice answered. Clear, professional, ready. "Jordan," I said. "It is Aurora. Go ahead." "Aurora," he said. "They gave the order." I said, "They told me to leave." "We are done here. Understood." Jordan said, "Initiating the exit protocol. I am coming in." I hung up. I looked at my watch. 5 minutes. I said to the room. Vanessa let out a nervous laugh. "What is this? Who is coming in? Is this some kind of joke?" "It is not a joke. Vanessa." I said, "It is the end of the joke." 5 minutes. I repeated. The room erupted. My father started shouting again, demanding to know who Jordan was. My mother was pulling at his arm, trying to sit him down. Uncle Bob was asking if he should call the police. The cousins were whispering frantically, but I just stood there. I checked my watch. 4 minutes. "What did you do?" Vanessa hissed, leaning across the table. Her eyes were wide with panic. She could feel the control slipping away like sand through her fingers. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I just invited a guest." 3 minutes. The tension in the room was physical. It was a vibrating wire. Every second that ticked by was a ratchet tightening the screw. They looked at the door. They looked at me. They looked at the papers on the table. "You are bluffing," my father said, though he sounded unsure. "You are trying to scare us. I am not the one who should be scared." "Dad," I said. 2 minutes. The chatter died down. The shouting stopped. A strange, terrified silence fell over the dinner party. They were waiting. They didn't know what they were waiting for. The police? A lawyer? A hitman? But the certainty in my voice had paralyzed them. 1 minute. I looked at Grandma June. She raised her glass of wine to her lips and took a slow, deliberate sip. She was enjoying the show. 0. The doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a long, sustained press. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. My mother jumped. Vanessa flinched. My father turned toward the hallway, his face draining of color. I picked up my phone. "I think you should answer that," I said. My father opened the door. He had no choice. The ringing was persistent. A steady electronic pulse that refused to be ignored. He threw the door open with the aggressive force of a man trying to intimidate whoever was on the other side. Expecting perhaps a neighbor complaining about parking or a delivery driver, instead, he found Jordan Hale. Jordan did not look like a guest. He looked like an event. He stepped into the foyer without waiting for an invitation, shaking the snow off his umbrella with a sharp, decisive snap. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like armor, and in his hand, he carried a black leather litigation case. He walked past my father as if he were a piece of furniture and entered the dining room. The room went deadly silent. Jordan stood at the head of the table, directly behind the empty chair where Vanessa had been standing just moments ago. He placed the case on the table. The sound of the heavy leather hitting the wood echoed like a gavel strike. "Who the hell are you?" my father demanded, rushing back into the room, his face a mask of confusion and rage. "You cannot just walk into my house during Christmas dinner." Jordan turned slowly. He adjusted his cufflinks. "I am Jordan Hale," he said. His voice was calm, baritone, and projected to the back of the room without shouting. "I am the retained legal counsel for Mrs. Aurora West." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the table, lingering on my grandmother. "And, as of this morning, I am also the legal representative for Mrs. June Carter regarding her estate planning and asset protection." A gasp went around the table. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Vanessa's eyes darted to Grandma June, who sat sipping her wine, her expression unreadable. This was the first blow. They thought they had the matriarch on their side, or at least that she was a neutral party. Jordan had just announced that the family's oldest power center had aligned with the enemy. "This is a private family gathering," Vanessa snapped. Finding her voice, "You are trespassing." "I am here at the invitation of my clients," Jordan replied smoothly. "And I am here to facilitate the transaction you were so eager to conclude." "Vanessa, you wanted a signature? You wanted a review of the assets?" He clicked the latches of his briefcase. Snap, snap, "Let us review." He pulled out the first binder, Bundle A, and dropped it onto the table. It was thick, at least 200 pages. For the last 16 months, this family has been operating under a narrative that Aurora West is mentally unstable, financially reckless, and unfit to manage her own affairs. Jordan began. He spoke like he was addressing a jury, making eye contact with Uncle Bob, Aunt Shirley, and the cousins. "You have been told she is gambling. You have been told she is booking lavish vacations. You have been told she is spiraling." He opened the binder. "However," Jordan continued, "the evidence suggests that the only thing being manufactured here is a conspiracy to defraud." He picked up a sheet of paper, Exhibit A. He read, "An email chain dated September 14th between Vanessa West and Richard West. Subject line, the insurance strategy." He looked at my father. "Do you recall this email?" "Richard?" My father turned a shade of gray that I had never seen on a living human being. "Allow me to read an excerpt." Jordan said, "She is weak right now. The grief has made her soft. If we hit her with the competency angle hard enough, she will fold. We need to get the power of attorney before she realizes the business is underwater. If we wait until Christmas, we can use the family pressure to crack her." Jordan dropped the page. It floated down to the table, landing next to the gravy boat. He picked up another, Exhibit B, he said. A text message thread from Vanessa to a family friend, purposefully leaked to create a rumor mill. "Just tell people she is buying designer bags. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be believable. Once the reputation is damaged, the legal argument for conservatorship becomes easier." Vanessa let out a strangled sound. "That is out of context. Those are fake. You typed those up." Jordan smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "I thought you might say that," he said. He reached into the briefcase and pulled out Bundle B. "This is a digital forensic authentication certificate, provided by a third-party cybersecurity firm," Jordan said, holding up a document with a gold foil seal. "Every email, every text, and every metadata tag has been verified against the server logs. We have the IP addresses, we have the device IDs, we have the timestamps." He looked at Vanessa. "This was sent from your iPhone 14 Pro. Vanessa, the one sitting right there on the table." Vanessa's hand instinctively covered her phone, as if to shield it from the accusation, But the damage was done. The relatives were exchanging looks. The pity that had been directed at me all night was evaporating, replaced by a dawning horror. They were realizing that the stories they had whispered over coffee, the stories about my instability, were not gossip. They were propaganda. "But we are not done," Jordan said. He reached into the briefcase again. "You wanted a performance tonight," he said. "You wanted a scene. You wanted Aurora to break down in front of an audience so you could justify taking her money. You planned it perfectly. In fact, you planned it so well. You wrote a script." He pulled out a stapled document. It looked like a screenplay. My mother made a low, keen sound, like a wounded animal. She recognized it. She had probably helped write it. This was found in a shared cloud folder titled Christmas Dinner Operations. Jordan said. He flipped to page 3. "Let's see if this sounds familiar," he said. He looked at Uncle Bob. At approximately 7:30, during the transition to dessert, Vanessa will tap her glass to get attention. She will make the emotional appeal about Evan's legacy. Signal for Bob to agree. Note, Bob responds well to the fiscal responsibility angle. Uncle Bob froze. His face went red, then white. He realized he wasn't a respected elder giving advice. He was a puppet who had been played. "And here," Jordan continued, reading further, "if Aurora resists, Dad, Richard, will escalate to the ultimatum. Use the leave and never return line. It triggers her abandonment issues. She will cry. Mom will reinforce the guilt." Jordan tossed the script onto the center of the table. It slid across the linen and stopped right in front of my father's plate. "You choreographed the emotional destruction of your own daughter," Jordan said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "You turned a family dinner into a heist. The room was so quiet you could hear the snow hitting the windows outside." Vanessa was shaking. Her composure had completely shattered. She looked small, shrunken inside her expensive clothes. We were just trying to help," she stammered. Her voice was thin, pathetic. "We didn't mean it like that. It was just, we needed a plan. We were desperate. It is a family matter," my father shouted suddenly. He slammed his fist onto the table. But the gesture lacked power. It was the flailing of a drowning man. "You have no right to be here. This is between us. You cannot bring the law into a dining room." "Actually, Richard," Jordan said coolly, "when you attempt to coerce a signature on a legal document worth $2 million through fraud and intimidation, it stops being a family matter. It becomes a felony." My father opened his mouth to argue, but a voice cut through the air. Sharp, clear, commanding. Enough. It was Grandma June. She stood up. She was 84 years old, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. She leaned her hands on the table and looked at her son. "Sit down. Richard," she said. My father looked at her. He blinked. He sat. June looked around the table. She looked at the cousins, the aunts, the uncles. "I have sat at this table for 50 years, she said. "I have watched you all grow up. I have watched you get married. I have watched you have children. And tonight, I am ashamed." She looked at Vanessa. "You used my house," she said. "You used my Christmas. You used these people, your own blood, as an audience for your cruelty. You thought that because you are family, you are entitled to forgiveness. You thought that because you share a last name, you can steal and lie and manipulate." She paused. "Family is not a shield," she said. "Family is not a license to eat your own young, and it is certainly not a permission slip for theft." She turned to me. Her eyes were soft, proud. "Aurora told you no," June said, "and instead of listening, you tried to break her. Well, look at her." She gestured to me. "She is not broken. But this family is shattered." She sat back down. The judgment had been delivered. Jordan stepped forward again. He had one more card to play. The final nail. "There is one last thing you should know," Jordan said, "and this is the part that proves just how little you knew the man you were trying to erase." He picked up the blue folder, the one Vanessa had tried to force me to sign, and held it up. "You wanted this signature so badly," Jordan said. You risked everything for it. But here's the irony. If Aurora had signed this paper, if you had succeeded in bullying her into submission, you would have triggered the very thing you were trying to avoid. He looked at Vanessa. Evan West was a brilliant lawyer, Jordan said. And he knew you. He knew all of you. He knew that if he died, you would come for the money. So he built a trap. Jordan opened his briefcase and pulled out a single, sealed document with a red legal stamp. It is called a conditional trust clause. Jordan explained. It is embedded in the insurance policy and the estate deeds. It states that if Aurora West is ever coerced into signing a power of attorney, or if she grants financial control to any member of the West family under duress, the assets are immediately frozen. He looked around the room, ensuring everyone understood. The money does not go to Vanessa. It does not go to Richard. It does not stay with Aurora. It bypasses everyone and locks into a blind trust for Mia. And that trust is managed by an independent, court-appointed auditor. My father's eyes went wide. An auditor? Yes, Jordan said. An auditor who would have full legal authority to investigate the family's financial history to ensure no fraud had occurred prior to the transfer. He leaned in close to my father. If she had signed that paper, Richard, the auditors would have looked at your books. They would have seen the insolvency. They would have seen the loans you are hiding. They would have seen where Vanessa has been moving money. You didn't just try to steal from Aurora. You almost invited the FBI into your own living room. The color drained from Vanessa's face completely. She slumped back in her chair. She realized how close she had come to prison, by refusing to sign. I hadn't just saved myself, in a twisted way. I had saved them from immediate prosecution. The relatives were looking at my father and sister with a mixture of horror and disgust. Uncle Bob put his napkin on the table. He looked at me. Aurora, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't know. I swear to God. I didn't know. They told me you were sick. They told me... They lied to you. Bob, I said quietly. And you believed them because it was easier than asking me the truth. Bob looked down, ashamed. Aunt Shirley was crying, but this time, her tears were real. The herd mentality had broken. The audience had turned. They realized they had been used as pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing. The dinner was ruined. The illusion of the perfect family was gone. All that was left was the ugly, jagged truth sitting on the table next to the cold turkey. Jordan closed his briefcase. We have established the facts, he said. We have the evidence of conspiracy. We have the proof of intent to defraud. Aurora has the right to press charges. My mother let out a sob. Please, she whispered. Please, Aurora. Don't. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me to leave and never return 10 minutes ago. I am not going to press charges. I said, my father exhaled. A long, ragged sound of relief. I am not going to put Mia's grandparents in jail. I continued. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I refuse to let your poison spread to her. I want her to have a childhood free of courtrooms and scandals. I stood up. I picked up my tote bag. But, I said, there is a price. What price? Vanessa whispered. She looked defeated. The fight had left her. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick envelope Grandma June had given me. The one I had kept sealed until this very moment. Jordan looked at June. June nodded. Now is the time. June said, open the envelope. Aurora. I broke the wax seal. I pulled out the papers. The room watched, breathless. They thought the surprises were over. They thought the worst had passed. They were wrong. This isn't a lawsuit, I said. Looking at the header of the document, I looked at my father. I looked at Vanessa. This is an eviction notice, but not for me. I held the document in my hands. The paper was heavy, textured, and cream-colored, the kind of stationery used for treaties and declarations of war. But as I read the bold header, I realized it was neither. It was a declaration of independence. I looked at my grandmother. June sat at the end of the table, her hands folded over her cane, her face impassive. She gave me a small nod. a silent permission to drop the final blade. I cleared my throat. The room was so quiet that the sound of the paper rustling was like a thunderclap. This is the Third Amendment to the Living Trust of June Carter. I read aloud. My voice was steady, echoing off the high ceilings of the dining room where, just minutes ago, I had been an outcast. I looked at my father. I looked at Vanessa. They were frozen, their eyes locked on the paper. They knew that Grandma June held the real wealth of the family, the house we were sitting in, the land in Albemarle County, and the controlling shares of the legacy investments. It all belonged to her. They had always assumed, with the arrogant certainty of blood, that it would eventually flow down to them. I continued reading. Effective immediately, the entirety of the Carter estate, including the primary residence at this address, the vacation property, and the investment portfolio, is transferred into a protective trust. I paused. I let them breathe. I let them hope. The sole beneficiary and executor of this trust. I read, looking directly at my sister, is Aurora West. The sound that came out of Vanessa was not a scream. It was a gasp, as if she had been punched in the stomach. She slumped back in her chair, her hand flying to her chest. "What?" she whispered. That is not possible." My father stood up, his face purple. "Mother, you cannot do this. You cannot cut us out. We are your children." I held up a hand. "I am not finished." I looked back at the document. "There is a clause here," I said. "Subsection D. It is titled the Anti-Corruption Provision." I read the text, enunciating every word clearly so there would be no confusion. In the event that any potential beneficiary engages in acts of financial coercion, fraud, or conspiracy to undermine the financial autonomy of another family member, they are permanently disqualified from receiving any distribution from this estate. I lowered the paper. The evidence Mr. Hale just presented, the emails, the texts, the script for tonight's dinner, constitutes proof of conspiracy. I said, "By trying to steal my husband's insurance money, you didn't just fail to get my $2 million. You just forfeited your own inheritance." The reality of it crashed into the room. It was absolute. It was devastating. Vanessa stared at the table. She was doing the math in her head. She had been counting on Grandma's money to bail out her own debts, to cover the lifestyle she couldn't afford. She realized in that second that she was not just broke. She was ruined. She had gambled everything on breaking me, and she had lost. My mother began to cry. It was a loud, ugly sound. "Mother, please," she sobbed, looking at June. "You cannot leave us with nothing. Richard's business, the debts. We will lose our house." June looked at her daughter. Her expression was not angry. It was just tired. "You made your bed." "Elaine," June said softly, "I told you years ago that enabling Richard's bad decisions would cost you. I told you that raising Vanessa to value status over character would destroy her. You didn't listen, and tonight, you tried to sacrifice Aurora to pay for your mistakes." June looked at me. "I am not leaving it to Aurora because she is my favorite." June said to the room, "I am leaving it to her because she is the only one who didn't ask for it, and she is the only one I trust not to squander it on appearances." The power dynamic in the room had completely inverted. 10 minutes ago, I was the helpless widow being ordered to leave. Now, I held the keys to the kingdom. My father sank into his chair. He put his head in his hands. He looked old. He looked defeated. "We can fix this," he muttered. "Aurora, honey, we can fix this. We can talk. We are family." I looked at him. The anger I expected to feel wasn't there. There was only pity. "No. Dad," I said, "we cannot fix this. Because you didn't break a vase. You broke trust. And trust is the one thing you cannot glue back together." I placed the document back in the envelope. I handed it to Jordan. He slid it into his briefcase and locked it. Snap. The sound was final. "I am not going to sue you." I said, "I am not going to press charges for the fraud. I am not going to drag you through the courts." Vanessa looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Really?" she asked. Really, I said, but not for your sake. I am doing it for Mia. I do not want her last name to be synonymous with a felony trial in the Richmond papers. I picked up my tote bag. I stood tall. But here are the new rules, I said, and they are non-negotiable. I looked at each of them in turn. 1, I said, you will never ask me for money again. Not a loan, not a gift, not a charity donation. If the business fails, it fails. If you lose the house, you figure it out. 2, I continued, you will stop the rumors. You will go to every person you lied to. Cousin Sarah, Linda at the pharmacy, everyone, and you will tell them the truth. You will tell them you were mistaken. If I hear one more whisper about me being unstable, Jordan will release the forensic evidence of your conspiracy to the public. And Vanessa, I don't think your PR firm can survive that kind of press. Vanessa nodded quickly. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by the desperate obedience of a survivor. And 3, I said, you will not contact me. You will not call. You will not drop by. If you want to see Mia, you will email Jordan. He will arrange supervised visits if, and only if, I feel it is healthy for her. My mother gasped. Supervised? But we are her grandparents. You forfeited the right to be grandparents when you tried to rob her mother. I said coldly. I turned to the rest of the table. Uncle Bob, Aunt Shirley, and the cousins were staring at me with wide, respectful eyes. They saw me now. They didn't see the weak widow. They saw the matriarch in training. I am sorry to ruin dinner. I said to them, but I think you can understand why I cannot stay. I walked over to Grandma June. I bent down and kissed her cheek. Her skin smelled of lavender and old paper. Thank you, I whispered. Go, she whispered back. Go be free. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I did not look back. I heard my father start to say my name, but his voice trailed off, silenced by the weight of his own shame. I walked down the hallway to the playroom. I opened the door. Mia was sitting on the floor, building a castle out of blocks with her cousins. She looked up, her face lighting up with a smile that was pure and unburdened by the politics of the adults in the other room. Mommy, she chirped, is dinner over? For us it is. Baby, I said, grab your coat. She stood up and ran to me. I helped her into her pink puffer jacket. I wrapped her scarf around her neck. Did you have a good time? I asked. Yes, she said. Sophie let me be the queen of the castle. I smiled. I picked her up. Even though she was getting too big for it, I needed to feel the weight of her in my arms. You are the queen of the castle. I said, you always will be. We walked out to the car. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world quiet and white. The air was crisp. I buckled Mia into her car seat. I got into the driver's seat. I started the engine. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the Mercedes and the BMWs behind. I drove away from the Victorian house with the wreaths and the candles. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel the urge to cheer. I just felt light. It was the feeling of taking off a heavy backpack after hiking for miles. The burden of their expectations, their judgment, and their greed was gone. I was free. The aftermath played out exactly as Jordan predicted. The next morning, my phone was silent. No angry texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. The silence was the first proof that the boundaries held. 2 days later, I received a card in the mail from Uncle Bob. Inside was a handwritten note apologizing for his silence at the dinner table. He wrote that he had been a fool to believe the rumors and that he admired my strength. He included a check for $500 for Mia's college fund. I tore up the check, but I kept the note. Vanessa's reputation took a hit. Though not a public one, in Richmond, circles are small. People talk. The rumors about her financial desperation started to circulate. Ironically fueled by the very people she had tried to manipulate, she lost 2 major clients that January. Justice, it turned out, did not always need a gavel. It just needed the truth to breathe. My parents sold their house 6 months later. They downsized to a condo in the suburbs. I heard through the grapevine that my father had finally declared bankruptcy for the business. It was a hard landing, but it was their landing, not mine. But the biggest change came from an unexpected knock on my door in February. It was a moving truck, and behind it was a sedan driven by a private nurse. Grandma June stepped out. She was using a walker now, the winter having settled into her joints. But her eyes were as sharp as ever. I walked out to meet her. "Grandma?" I asked. "What is happening?" She looked at the house, my house, the one Evan and I had bought. "That Victorian mausoleum is too big for one old woman," she said, "and the ghosts are too loud. I cannot live there anymore, not after seeing what I saw at that table." She looked at me. "I need a real family. Aurora, I need noise. I need baking smells. I need to see my great-granddaughter grow up before I close my eyes." She pointed to the moving truck. "I brought my own furniture, and I am paying rent. Do not argue with me." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed freely in months. "I wouldn't dream of arguing with you." "June," I said, "and so, our family grew. It has been 2 years since that Christmas. Our life is different now. The house is full. Grandma June has the downstairs master suite. Mia is 10, and she is learning to play the piano on the baby grand that June brought with her. I did not stop working. I kept my job at the agency, but I work on my own terms now. I manage the trust with Jordan's help, investing conservatively, building a fortress around Mia's future that no one can ever breach again. Tonight, the kitchen is warm. The smell of cinnamon and sugar fills the air. Mia is standing on a stool, rolling out dough. Grandma June is sitting at the kitchen table, supervising with a critical but loving eye, too thick on the edges. "Mia," June says, "you want it even like this?" Mia asks, adjusting the rolling pin. "Perfect," June says, "just like your mother." I am sitting on the window seat, writing in my journal. I look at them. This is what family is supposed to be. It is not about blood obligations or financial leverage. It is about safety. It is about the people who make you feel bigger, not smaller. I look down at the page I'm writing. They told me to leave and never return. It was meant to be a curse. It was meant to be a punishment. But as I look at the snow falling outside the window, covering the driveway where no one is coming to demand anything from me, I realize it was the greatest gift they could have given me. I did leave. I left the guilt. I left the fear. I left the version of myself that thought I had to buy their love, and I never returned. I stayed here, in the warmth of the truth, where I belong. Thank you so much for listening to Aurora's story. It was a journey of finding strength in the darkest of places. And I hope it reminded you that sometimes, walking away is the most powerful step you can take. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story from right now? Are you in the kitchen like Aurora? Driving in your car? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get a conversation started. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear it. Your support means the world to us. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.